Joe Biden is back from the political grave. Yep, you heard that right. President Joe Biden has crawled out of the ashes, but not like a glorious phoenix. No, no, no. More like a political zombie staggering through a BBC interview, where he defends his anti-American, globalist policies and kind of admits that his entire administration was a flop. Let's break this down. First, Biden is asked a blunt question. Mr. President, should you have stepped out of the race sooner to give Kamala a better shot? Biden's answer? I don't think it would have mattered. We left at a time when we had a good candidate. She was fully funded, and we were so successful in our agenda, no one thought we could do what we did. It was hard to say, now I'm going to stop. I meant what I said when I started. I was prepared to hand this to the next generation. But things moved so quickly, it made it difficult to walk away. Wait, what? Did he just accidentally admit they were too successful in pushing their radical agenda to stop? Hold up, let's roll the highlight reel. 1. Mass illegal immigration. 2. New wars breaking out. 3. Massive inflation crushing the middle class, while the elites pocketed more wealth. 4. DEI policies ripping through America's cultural fabric. 5. Forcing controversial gender ideology on children. So yeah, they were super successful at burning the house down. Even Biden, with his fading cognitive battery, understands. The American people weren't happy. All the billions in the world couldn't scrub away the fact that Kamala Harris was glued to Joe Biden and all his failures. The Democrat Party, the same party screaming about the end of democracy, literally rejected democracy and anointed their next presidential pick. And here's Biden saying, regrets? No, I think it was the right decision. I don't think it would have made much difference. Yikes. That's either 1, him admitting they failed so badly no one could stop Trump, or 2, hinting conspiracy hat on, that they only won in 2020 because of COVID-era weirdness, mail-in ballots, chaotic infrastructure, and a messy election process. Interesting, right? Especially considering Kamala pulled 14 million fewer votes than Biden, while Trump kept his 2020 numbers steady. But wait, there's more. The reporter then pivots to Ukraine. Did you not have the courage to go all the way to let Ukraine win? You let them stop the invasion, but you didn't give them the long-range weapons they needed to win. Biden's defense? Well, a few people say that, but winning without engaging NATO against Russia is unlikely. We gave them everything they needed for independence, and we were prepared to respond more aggressively if Putin moved again. Hold up, what? So you didn't give Ukraine the tools to win because you were scared it would drag NATO into war? Then what was the point? You gave them just enough to hold the line, but not enough to win. What was the plan, Joe? Answer: there was no plan. The only winners were the military-industrial complex, cashing in on a forever war. Ukraine lost territory, Russia held ground, and the stalemate dragged on, all while the U.S. shipped $250 billion in taxpayer money with zero accountability. And then Biden takes a swipe at Trump, the only guy proposing an end to the bloodshed. Trump's plan? Negotiate peace, even if Ukraine has to make territorial concessions. The reporter asks, isn't that just common sense? Biden's response? It's modern-day appeasement. Look at what Putin said. He believes Ukraine is part of Mother Russia. He wants to reestablish the Warsaw Pact. He can't stand the collapse of the Soviet Union. But wait, Joe, if you really believe Putin was this dangerous, why didn't you support Ukraine enough to win and push Russia back? Boom, contradiction exposed. Instead, Biden funneled U.S. money to Ukraine without a winning strategy, enriching elites, and leaving everyday Americans wondering why their hard-earned dollars were funding endless wars. And here's where Biden really reveals his hand. I fear our allies will begin to doubt whether we're going to stay where we've always been for the last 80 years. There it is. It wasn't about protecting America. It was about appeasing Europe and protecting the global order. We sat down for that very first meeting. I believe it was February of my first year, and I looked across the room, took a breath, and said, America's back. And Manuel, he just looked right back at me and asked, for how long? It was a powerful moment. I'll admit it. I take some responsibility and credit for rebuilding NATO. We added two major powers to the alliance. And you know what? Just 10 days before Dr. Kissinger passed away, he called me up. His words? Not since Napoleon has Paris not looked over its shoulder at Moscow with a feeling of dread. Until you came along. NATO is stronger. They can't do that anymore. They know. But I still hear Manuel's words echoing. For how long? Fast forward to now, after all the progress. Here we are. In just 4 years, we've got a guy stepping up, itching to walk away from it all. And that's where the worry creeps in. Will Europe lose faith in America? Will they stop trusting the certainty of American leadership? Not just on NATO, but on all the global matters that have ripple effects across the world? Sure, France is thrilled they no longer have to sweat over Russia. But here's the real kicker. What should they really be worried about? Why was the American public so frustrated? Simple. There was zero concern for the American people. Instead of laser focusing on whether we're reliable to France, Germany, or Ukraine, maybe, just maybe, we should have been asking, is the U.S. government reliable to its own citizens? And that, folks, is where Democrat ideologues miss the mark. They're not living in reality. Americans have no problem standing up for big ideals, freedom, democracy, but not when it comes to the cost of their own well-being. Let's break it down. First, years of hyperinflation have crushed everyday Americans, making life more expensive across the board. Secondly, lockdowns strangled the economy, closed schools, and set kids back years academically. With all that piled up, can you blame Americans for turning inward, for wanting to prioritize their own well-being over Ukrainians or Europeans? But Joe Biden and the Democrat camp, their attitude was, how dare you? How dare you prioritize yourselves over Europe? Those same Europeans who, by the way, love to mock America as a wild, gun-toting country with no free health care, no generous parental leave, but who turn around and expect us to bail them out anytime Russia rattles its saber. Let's not forget, these same Democrats stay glued to this philosophy. Even after losing elections, they care about MS-13 gang members. They care about poor populations across the third world who no longer get free handouts from USAID. They were rooting for Trump's terror strategy to fail because they wanted the global system to keep milking the U.S. with unfair trade deals. And they scoffed at the idea of bringing manufacturing back home, even though manufacturing was a backbone of the middle-class boom after World War II. Sure, as a global superpower, we have some responsibility to help maintain world order. No one's denying that. But forcing Americans to lower their standard of living just to prop up other countries? That's absurd. If a country in Africa can't survive without U.S. foreign aid, that's not our problem. If Europe can't defend itself against Russia because they're too busy handing out freebies in their cushy socialist systems, that's not our problem. But again, Democrats, they're clinging to the status quo, blind to the fact that the American people voted to take a wrecking ball to it. Think about it. If the America First philosophy is such an existential threat to the world, doesn't that just prove how fragile and broken the world order really was? In one of his closing moments, Biden tries to guilt-trip the American public by recounting how world leaders would pull him aside at G7 or NATO or G20 meetings, pleading, "We need the United States. We need the United States." He's banking on Americans feeling all warm and fuzzy about that honorable responsibility, hoping they'll prioritize it over their own prosperity. But let's be honest. Does Donald Trump buy into that obligation? Nope. And here's the twist. Biden brags about knowing every major world leader over the last 30 years. He says at that last big meeting, almost every leader pulled him aside, whispering, "We got to keep NATO. My democracy is at stake. Every generation has to fight to maintain democracy." Translation? He wants us to believe it's perfectly okay for Americans to keep footing the bill for everyone's security. Because, hey, Europe needs to feel safe. Meanwhile, on the home front, we're supposed to allow 15 million illegal immigrants to flood into the country, support them through our social programs, rack up an insane national debt. Also, Europe can feel secure because democracy matters that much. And Biden has the nerve to accuse Trump of being the one who's engaging in appeasement. If there's one thing this interview revealed, it's that Biden's top priority isn't the American people. It's making sure world leaders like him, making sure he feels powerful and important on the global stage. And maybe, just maybe, he'd have a point if the Russia-Ukraine war hadn't broken out. If the Israel-Hamas war hadn't erupted, if his whole Americans need to sacrifice to maintain global stability philosophy had actually resulted in peace, well then, we might be having a different conversation. But instead, all it did was perpetuate a system where the world remains addicted to American welfare. And here's the punchline. Because they were never forced to take responsibility for their own well-being, the moment Trump steps up and says, "Enough! I care about American citizens first," all those supposed allies lose their minds. They see it as a betrayal, as crumbling alliances, as the U.S. becoming hostile. And that, my friends, is why NATO is at risk today, because the American people have had enough. They've seen how the world reacts when the U.S. dares to ask for a little fairness. The Democrat platform, it used to be about free stuff for American citizens. But Biden, he's expanded it. Now it's about free stuff for illegal immigrants and Europeans, too. And that's exactly why Americans overwhelmingly voted for someone whose platform was crystal clear, America first. But what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a video. I'll see you in the next one.